Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Hi, welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. My name's Neil Munro.
I'm Ian Stone.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about what is asbestos waste. So Ian, can you answer that question?
So yeah, asbestos waste, it's not just the physical material, it's not just the actual asbestos itself that's classed as waste and disposed of as waste. It's also any materials that are used in and around what we do within enclosures and things like that. So any materials that we used to form part of the enclosure, such as the polythene sheeting, the timber struts that help hold up the polythene sheeting on larger enclosures, all of those items must be disposed of as contaminated asbestos waste.
Okay, and so is all asbestos waste the same when we talk about the actual materials itself?
Yeah, it is. I mean, asbestos, it's all treated the same. All the waste is the same. It's not like filtered off for actual physical asbestos waste goes to one place and then the polythene and the timber goes to another. It's all treated exactly the same, all as asbestos waste.
Yeah, so if it was like a ceiling tile, that would be the same as like a bit of debris on the floor? Or...
Yeah, same as pipe insulation or asbestos cement or vinyl tiles. Again, even on like the risk category of pipe insulation or sprayed asbestos, that's treated exactly the same way and disposed of the same way as a bitumen product or a floor tile product or something where the asbestos is really well bound within the matrix. They're all treated the same and disposed of the same.
Yeah, so there's no kind of, with the removal processes, they're sometimes a little bit different, aren't they? So the waste is actually treated exactly the same when it comes to actually removing and disposing of it.
Exactly. I mean, for asbestos waste, for, like you say, the removal methods are different. So for sprayed insulation or pipe insulation, that would be injected at source before it's removed. Something like asbestos cement, that would be sprayed down before it's removed. So it's still using controlled wetting techniques. But ultimately, like I say, the actual asbestos waste that comes out of that process is all treated the same and disposed of the same way.
Okay, so we're removing asbestos, whether it's in an enclosure or whether it's in a suitably controlled environment. We've actually removed the material from its location. How do we actually bag that up or get it from the work area out?
Okay, so the asbestos waste itself, it's usually bagged up within asbestos waste sacks. They've got unique identifiers on them to show that they contain asbestos. There's unique numbers that should be on the bags as well as symbols that should be on the bags. Asbestos can also be wrapped as well. But again, if asbestos is then going to be taken away and the wrapping itself hasn't got those identifiers on, then they must be placed on that waste wrap before it's removed as well.
Yeah, because the idea of removing asbestos is careful removal, isn't it? We try to avoid breakage as much as possible, isn't that right?
And that's why certain things such as large sheets, large garage sheets, they would be wrapped up rather than broken and put into bags, because then if you had to break the asbestos up to put it into the bags, you kind of defeating the point of what we're doing, which is trying
increasing the risk of exposure, fire release. So ceiling tiles carefully removed, placed into bags.
Exactly that. So in the case of asbestos insulating board ceiling tile, be unscrewed, it'd be wetted down, it would be handed to another operative. They would place that ceiling tile within a red bag first. That red bag would then have as much air removed from the bag as possible, and then the neck of the actual bag would be sealed. So it'd be wrapped around itself as such and then fully taped around. And then before it leaves the enclosure, it's then wiped down again to remove any further contamination that's possibly happened when the asbestos was being placed in the bag. And once it's wiped down and the operative's happy that there's nothing on that bag, it's then placed into a secondary bag, which is a clear asbestos bag. And the reason for this is so that you can see that it has been double bagged, because if it was in two red bags, you wouldn't be able to see. If it was in two clear bags, it'd still make it difficult to see. So the fact that it's placed in a red bag and then into a clear bag, you can really see straight away that it has been double bagged.
So the bags all in all, they're about 1,000 gauge polythene, so it's 500 each bag.
500 each bag most of the time, and then so that makes 1,000 gauge.
Yeah, so if that doesn't make sense to you, the actual thickness, when you feel a bag, it is quite thick. You can tell the difference. It's not, it's not like cling film. It's quite a solid bag, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, polythene that we use for asbestos enclosures is usually always at 1,000 gauge. And the waste bags, like Neil said, are 500 gauge. So if you're ever on site, I would ask to see the difference. Like if you can...
Yeah, you can really tell the difference, can't you?
You really can.
Gauge.
Like Neil said, it's a lesser gauge, the more like cling film it becomes. And it's just no good because the waste that we're getting rid of in these bags, a lot of time it's heavy stuff, sharp edges, things like that. So that's why it's got to be a decent thickness. If you kind of, I suppose for everyday people and the kind of what I would say it's similar to is like the heavy duty rubble sacks.
Yeah.
It's that kind of gauge, that kind of thickness, that kind of feel.
Yeah, builder's sacks, so those really thick sort of gauge
Yeah.
ones. Yeah, definitely not your swing bin liners or anything like that. Okay, so we've got the asbestos waste bagged or sealed or wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
It's ready to go. What sort of happens next? How do we get it from the work area to where does it go next?
Okay, so like I say, once it's been fully sealed, it's been cleaned down and then double bagged, then an outside operative, usually called the outside man, would do the waste transfer. So they would come partial way into the airlocks and collect the waste and take it to either the waste skip or the actual waste vehicle, depending on the job. For larger projects, you would have different size waste containers, large skips from the small sort of 9-yard bins up to the 40-yard roll-on, roll-off bins. But for smaller projects, it's just as easy for contractors to remove the asbestos waste in their vehicles. However, that said, for them to remove it in their vehicles, they can't just sling the asbestos waste in the back of the van with all of the other items that they're carrying. So all their tools
equipment and stuff like that.
Exactly. They need to have a fully segregated waste compartment. And I've seen all sorts over the years. I've seen actual waste vans where contractors had a chippy build a full-on asbestos waste compartment in their van. I've seen contractors use small little wheelie bins for really small amounts of waste, or even the big kind of biffer push-along bins. I've seen those in the back of vans as well. And all that is for, it's just to keep the waste segregated from any other item that might pierce the bag and might affect the bag's integrity, basically.
Yeah, because I suppose if you get a split asbestos waste sack, then potentially you're going to end up contaminating the contents of the vehicle itself, which may not be able to be cleaned, and you'll have to end up destroying or getting rid of that equipment. Okay, so they're vans and the skips. Is there any sort of controls we need to put in place regards to those? Obviously, if they're on sites, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big things, same for the decontamination unit and asbestos waste skips, when they're not in use, they must be locked. On the waste skip, they've got padlocks on there, usually chains and things like that on the big bins.
Yeah, we definitely don't want anyone sort of opening their nose up.
No, and that's the reason. You don't want Joe Public to walk along and think, I'm just going to have a look at it, because
people are nosy, aren't they?
People are inherently nosy. And a little bit of red and white barrier tape or a little sign on something doesn't generally always put people off.
No, it's quite the opposite, really. It's like, oh, what's in here?
Yeah, I want to go and have a look. And before you know it, they've gone into the back of a waste skip. They've opened up a bag because they're super nosy.
Yeah, rummaging
through to find asbestos. Not a pot of gold, what they were looking for.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So basically, anything to do with waste should be sort of sealed off, locked away, so people can't come into contact with it. Okay, so if the waste is bagged up, it's in the waste vehicle, it's in a lockable skip on site.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of happens next then? So how do we get it from there, and where does it go?
Well, this is probably one of the biggest questions that I'm always asked.
Yeah, it's a common one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What
happens to asbestos? Yeah. Do you burn it? Do you get rid of it? What happens? Well, the simple answer is it goes to landfill. Essentially, we're putting it back into the ground
where
it came from, yeah. Except now it's all wrapped up in polythene.
Yeah. So it leaves the site, and generally that goes to a transfer station, doesn't it? So it doesn't go direct from site to landfill, does it, usually?
No, a lot of the time it will go to, like you say, a transfer station. They will separate the waste out and collect it with other asbestos waste until they've filled the larger skips for that all to go off to landfill. And one thing that we haven't kind of spoken about that is also important as well as the asbestos waste is the asbestos waste consignment note. So when asbestos waste is consigned, it must have a waste consignment note to go with it. And what that is denoting is It details where the asbestos has come from, where it's actually going to, so the details of the waste transfer station. Also details what type of asbestos you've got, what kind of product it was, whether it was, I don't know, texture coating, floor tiles, what percentage of asbestos was in there, what packing group it needs to be classed as, because amphibole asbestos and serpentine asbestos are treated slightly separately in the packing groups, and they've got different packing group codes. So serpentine asbestos is packing group 3 for things like asbestos cement, whereas amphiboles is packing group 2. And then they've also got separate unique identifiers numbers as well. And the code is UN2212 for amphibole asbestos, whereas UN2590 is for chrysotile asbestos. And all of this information is put onto the asbestos waste consignment note, and it's signed by the person who's consigning the material. So it might not always be the contractor who's been on site dealing with the asbestos that's taking it away. It could be, like Neil said earlier, another waste vehicle coming to collect the waste. So the waste van would turn up, the guy would check over the asbestos waste, it would be loaded up, they would consign and sign for that waste, and then if they're the driver of the vehicle as well, they sign to say that they've received it and they're transporting it. And then the last thing that happens when it gets to the waste transfer station is that note is given to the waste transfer site. They, again, double check everything on the form, make sure everything's there, including things like postcodes. And then once that's done and the waste has been removed from the vehicle or the skip, the waste transfer company signs to say they've confirmed that they've received it. So as part of your asbestos project pack at the end completion, that's a really big thing that you should look for and ask for, because that details it's gone to a legitimate waste site. There's only a few asbestos waste sites in the country that actually take asbestos. So it's really important and vital to get a copy of this consignment note, because then that proves that the asbestos waste has been disposed of correctly.
Yeah, because ultimately, with all waste, you as the duty holder, you are ultimately responsible for that waste. So if there was anything awry that went, if you didn't employ the correct contractor to dispose of that waste, you're responsible for that. So yeah, this is a definite important point to check, and always ask for the waste certificates, because that's your evidence that it has been disposed of correctly.
Definitely. But yeah, that's the big thing. Basically, asbestos, it's removed wet, it's bagged up and sealed, it's removed from site, and essentially it goes off to landfill. That's the long and short of what happens to asbestos waste in the UK.
Yeah, so I hope you found that useful, and remember, asbestos first, not last.